Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Skiff Travel Podcast. Today on the pod, we've got Tom Marchant from Black Tomato to talk all things luxury. But first, we got a question to our podcast inbox about Southwest. Here it is. Now that Ryan Green is gone, do you think they stick with the extra legroom model previously announced or go a step further and add domestic first-class products? Our reader suggests possibly love seats, which I honestly think is adorable and great. Big comfy chairs and maybe some enhanced snack offerings. Feels like once they have that, maybe they can co-brand a credit card and possibly compete with the big three. So that is, a little bit of that ab-nerd questions coming in. Seth, what do you think?
I love it. We love just getting the questions and the feedback. I think this particular caller, I guess, called it Southwest fan fiction. We're open to any hospitality fan fiction you want to send us, but I think the idea of first class makes a ton of sense, actually, and I think it's one of the product classes that they're missing, right? Like I was actually a little surprised at the reaction to the Southwest. No bags, no longer fly free.
Yeah,
because everyone's like, oh, they're giving away the one thing they have. I think it's great for them. Like, they really are behind the times. I think they need new technology. The ancillary thing, ancillary revenue is a proven model. And look, we're seeing, as we talked to Jay Shabbat at Airline Weekly, and he points out, rightly so, that JetBlue is redoing its planes. It's built a real first-class mint product. I think even Spirit Airlines has the big front seat, right? So
yes, they do. Yeah, I'm from Detroit, and so I fly Spirit all the time. And yes, they do have a big front seat, and I have never sat in one. So there we go.
So I think, big front seat, like some sort of a premium product, cabin class makes a ton of sense. Co-brand, these credit cards, literally billions of dollars of revenue a year, builds your loyalty customer base, ancillary revenue. It just makes sense. There's some tech on the backside. This writer also suggests they buy SkyWest and start flying to Knoxville, Greenboro, and Burlington. Dear reader, I don't know that one is my favorite suggestion, but I do love the idea of a love seat and a few other fun ancillary perks for Southwest. I think it makes a ton of sense.
I love the love seats. I love the love seats. I love it. I'm not a marketer, but I just think that's killer. Okay,
but we're not talking about budget travel on this real episode, really, right? That's not the gist of it.
We are definitely not talking about budget travel on this one. Today, we're going to talk about luxury. Luxury. Seth, have you ever been on a luxury trip? A real one?
A real one? I don't. Well, we'll talk with Tom about what the definition of luxury is. I think I've been on a real luxury trip, but yeah, I do. Have you?
Well, I thought I had until I started working at Skiff.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
then I started meeting people from the Emirates and Oman, and I don't know. I actually don't think I've ever been on a luxury trip. Now,
all right, fair. Let's not spend too much time of just us talking. Let's get our guests in. But I will say that's very fair, because I have not ever bought out the top 5 floors of the one hotel or anything like that. That's for sure. But I've done a safari, and I've done some really beautiful trips that were really meaningful to me.
All right. So enough about us. Tom, how you doing?
I'm great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I've just been enjoying hearing the questions being answered. I'm all for love seats. It sounds great.
Yeah. So speaking of very cool sounding branding, tell us about Black Tomato.
Yeah, it's an interesting name, isn't it? It goes back to kind of right at the start of the. In terms of the name itself, came from when I was actually working just after college. I got asked to go and do a few weeks work in Moscow, would you believe? And I then kind of got to know the city very well, went back and forth. And then as we were beginning to start plans what was going to become the company, myself and my partners were back in Moscow, and we were eating in a restaurant, and very random place where we saw a black tomato on the menu, and said to the waiter, what is a black tomato? And he gave a very passionate speech about it being this rare form of tomato, but when you find it, it tastes amazing, and it gives you this great quality experience. And that stuck in our head. So we aspired to be the black tomato of travel, so offering these rare quality experiences. So it was an unusual name. And also, we bootstrapped the company when we started. We weren't launching with, millions of dollars of advertising budget. So having something that well, at least provoked intrigue, even if no one knew what the hell it meant, was something to kind of get us noticed. But it harks back to stories that kind of form the company and what we based it around.
It's a rare Russian luxury.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That is also something I have never
Hasn't it
experienced. So yeah, so Black Tomato, it's known for its unique and immersive travel experiences. So Seth and I were talking about whether we actually aren't sure whether we have ever been on a luxury trip. How do you guys define luxury in today's travel landscape? I mean, I sit on stage with all sorts of owners and I don't know, they kind of give me their PR answers for that. But like, so don't give me that one. Tell me what real luxury is right now.
I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because I think it's a very, very personal view, luxury, and I think but even at a macro level, the definition of luxury has been shifting. Ever since we started, been going 20 years. I think what I always come back to, for me, and I think at Black Tart is the word it's about being thoughtful, right? And by thoughtful, what that means is creating things that feel really particular to the person receiving it, right? So in this kind of increasingly, I feel like commoditized world we're living, where everything's immediate, everything's quite homogenous, having something, whether it be a material good or a trip that feels that it's been really thought about in the context of you, that feels like a luxury. But so you're experiencing it as you'd want it to be. And obviously that can then parlay into it feeling unique, it can parlay into feeling like something that's exceptionally rare and all the things that come with it. But what it also means is that perhaps some of the age-old definitions or perceptions of luxury, which might be gold-plated taps and butler service, all this stuff, it doesn't always have to mean that. When we started the company, one of the first experiences we found or discovered was this lake outside Reykjavik, where there's a sulfur. It's called the sulfur crack, where you can go and dive between basically two tectonic plates, so the Americana plate and the Eurasia plate, and you can get down there. You can basically have one hand on either plate. And lots of people have done it now, but basically you could kind of be technically, may I quoting, holding the world apart, right? And that, relative to what people might think is luxury is pretty cheap, but it's just unique and it's something particular to them. And that's what I think. Why it's a very personal thing. I'm not sitting on the fence, but I think it's how you interpret it. Some things obviously are defined by price because they're hard to do. You have to go far. You have to put a lot of resource into it, but it's certainly not just by price. For me, it's about demonstrating true thought, and I think that's important.
Yeah, you're talking to two divers here on the pod, Seth and I. Yeah, so like that sounds incredible. I
was gonna say, when we did our skiff retreat to Iceland, I did the Silver dive. So it turns out our skiff retreat was a luxury trip the whole time.
There you go. You've done it. You ticked it. You don't need to do any more. It's really remarkable. I think you could also look at, say, I often talk about if you take the cost of a suite at a particular hotel, which is fantastic and beautiful, but you could spend the same amount on, I don't know, getting deep into the Mongolian steppe and camping out and reading under a canopy of stars where the light is so bright you can read by starlight, right? But you're sleeping on kind of Hessian mats and stuff. Now that might traditionally not be seen as luxury because you don't have all this stuff, but the uniqueness of that and the particularity of that to you, people would still take the same value in terms of what it means to them as they would perhaps in that suite. So again, there's a whole array of ways of talking about it, but at the heart of it, it's ultimately very personal.
Well, that leads to a great point. I think this is something you guys are all about, is like feelings first. Like it's about the individual perception and the emotion. And I was going to ask you why it's important to your brain. I think you've sort of answered that a little bit. I guess my question is, how does that guide the destinations that you pick? And also, how does that work with, how do you get into the feelings of your customers? Everyone feels something a little differently, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is, when we started the company, as we were kind of thinking about what the company would be, myself and my business partner, James, we traveled a lot at college, and we'd always be talking in this language of like, I don't necessarily know where I want to go, but I'm looking for a particular feeling. And that is really what we based the start of the company around. It wasn't about long lists of destinations. And in those days, there were a long list of destinations, whether it was websites or brochures and lots of lists of activities, but nothing would tell you how it was going to make you feel. You'd have to kind of do that. And so it was almost like an extension of our travel, but also it was just a common truth. You talk to people and they'd say, I'm looking to get away to do something or feel like this. Or you'd hear people coming back from travel talking about these moments or these experiences that made them feel a particular way. And so for us, it's always been at the heart of our business. And there's this real really powerful connection between travel and emotion. I think we all know it, but sometimes can get lost in the millions of messages that are being pushed out, and the way sometimes travel, for various reasons, can kind of be kind of debased to something that feels quite kind of transactional. But at the luxury end, it shouldn't be that. And so feelings has always been at the heart of the business. In fact, when we launched the company, which would be terrible for SEO these days, but we didn't actually have any destinations on the site. It was simply categorized according to the emotional needs it would fulfill. My SEO team would have kittens now about that, but it's always been there. And then basically we look at destinations and experience. We go out to kind of see what they offer, the experience they have, what the kind of the takeaway is. And we have lots of extensive research and we have extensive notes and people are looking for certain things. But then also it's about understanding, like you say, what the customers are looking for. And part of the journey in terms of working with Black Tomato is allowing our travel experts and advisors to really get to understand what makes our customers tick. I think sometimes there's a danger it can happen in travel where you have companies who know these places inside out, but if you don't really understand your audience, and it sounds like I'm saying the obvious, but what makes them tick, then you can kind of get lost in delivering something exceptional. So for us, it's as important to understand the psychology of our customers as it is the places, and then it's matching those. So then it's about us sort of teasing out of our customers the things they're really looking for. And sometimes it's quite interesting. They don't really know what they're looking for, but once you ask the questions, you start unraveling and unveiling these emotions they're looking for. And that's how we then start putting them together. Now, look, some people will get in touch with us and say, I really want to go to Namibia. I've read this article. It really speaks to me. Can we do that? And that's great. Other people may have sort of an idea. Other people don't have any idea, but it's just about the emotion they're seeking. Or perhaps they want to go somewhere for the full gamut of emotions. I want to go somewhere I'm going to feel challenged, but then moved and then kind of isolate. So it's kind of our language. It's I would say our love language. It sounds slightly over the top, but it's how we've always talked and thought and iterated with product and ideas at Black Tomato. So it's a very natural representation of how the company operates.
It makes complete sense to me when you're dealing with a true luxury customer because, when you've got that when you've got that much money, you can pretty much buy anything. So, what's left, right? It's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it goes back to that point about thoughtfulness at the start. It's like, if someone could have everything, it's like, well, what are the things that matter? And that's sometimes where you do start moving beyond just kind of material tick boxing and going, actually, I'm looking to kind of feel this way or perhaps have memories that I can reflect on that way. And that can kind of, that can give you a whole host of different ways to approach something. Some of the fondest memories people have might be of the random taverna that they stumbled across on a deserted beach on the wild side of a Greek island, but the conversation they had with the owner and the fresh fish they've eaten, that will trump anything that they could have had in any 3 Michelin star restaurant around the world that comes with all the bells and whistles. But it's like that is around, say, like an emotion of like discovery or discovery and connecting into a local culture. And those are the things quite often. I mean, I know it's used a lot in the restaurant industry, and he talks about it in Unreasonable Hospitality, Alex Garland, the book. But it is about, so often it's the people and those experiences around those things that you remember more often than just the place. So it's the people and the experience that are being created, and that's, we put that front and center in terms of how we approach the production of the trips at Black Tomato.
So I don't know how much you can share, but it sounds like your travel advisors are as much therapists as they are actual travel bookers. And I don't know how much details you can share. Do you have any real life examples of a luxury traveler who said, I want to go to X, Y, and Z? And then you said, well, tell me about how it's going to make you feel. And then you kind of change their perspective. Does that happen? Like, is there real examples where someone says, I was going to go to Greece and I wound up in Mongolia, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it does happen. It happens all the time. And I'll happily share the ones I can. I think, you know, again, people build things in their heads about this place is going to be right for me. I need to know that. And then when you start talking to them, you say, well, actually, I think what you're looking for is something else. And I think if you've established kind of a level of trust, they will do that. So, we've had lots of people who might want to, we've had some people say like, I need to go and, climb this mountain, and because for me, climbing a mountain, I believe, is going to give me this feeling of satisfaction and achievement. And yeah, that's what I want to be. And then when you start digging into it, you actually find that actually what they're really looking for is perspective, right? And actually, perspective might be found better in somewhere that's more remote and less about the challenge, but more about the thought process of where you are and how you immerse yourself in that. And and so that it is honestly the therapy kind of analogy is talked about quite a lot. And we didn't set out to do it, but the conversations we have, the level of depth we get into with people about what matters. I mean, we've had, there's one lady who from I think she's in Texas who got in touch and was saying, I'm burnt out. I just want to go I want to go to a deserted island, Alana Beach, and that's going to calm me down. And as the conversation went on, what became apparent was actually, and I'm like this myself, like burnt out and going lying on the beach doesn't really necessarily help because your mind's still going, and all you're doing is going, I'm somewhere kind of prettier and hotter, but all the stress I've got is sort of because my mind's not being distracted, right? And so what happened then? We subsequently then worked with it and created what we have a service called Get Lost, where we take people off into remote parts of the world. They don't know where they're going, and then they have to explore their way out of this environment. And it's almost like it sounds weird me saying it, but it's kind of like a wellness product for us because why we created it was because it's both a physical challenge, but it's a mental challenge as well, meaning that when you're doing this trip and you're lost, albeit with people can see you, you can't see them, but you're on a journey, you're having to think about every step you're taking, right? And so your mind can't wander back to the stress of home or the 1,000 emails or whatever that you got. So you suddenly start becoming more relaxed or de-stressing because of the distraction. So she went and did a Get Lost trip with us in the Atlas Mountains. And it was amazing for her. It was profound for her. So she'd have these incredible days journeying and then she'd be camping overnight. And it just gave her this huge life reset and this perspective she was after. But originally she thought it was going to come from lying on a beach. And look, I'm a big fan of beaches. I'm going to be on one in 2 weeks' time with my kids. I can't wait. But for what she was looking for in terms of that, that's a good example of how working with travel experts who both, yes, know the world, but also take time to understand as much as we can. We're not professionals, therapists, but the inner workings of your mind and how travel can perhaps help that. That was the end result, and it worked out really well for her.
I think there's a couple of reality shows that are kind of like that. I'm totally serious. Has anyone ever have the producers come calling? Have they ever called?
No, we have. Yes. Yeah. We do get approached. And it's always flattering. It's always interesting. I think with our general take is sometimes the reality shows that sort of make the airwaves are the ones that kind of are riddled with jeopardy and things going wrong because that kind of makes it more interesting. So that's our default. But no, yeah. There's a lot of what we do. We have our regular day-to-day kind of bespoke service where we will inspire and work with people. But every kind of 18 months or so, we release like a new kind of product or service, which is so that's where Get Lost came from. We have ones called Blink, which is this bespoke pop-up accommodation you can design yourself. We have one called See You in the Moment, which is how we've reinterpreted group travel. So we do this for every 18 months, and it's a way of us kind of asking questions about new ways of traveling or seeing the world, or getting people to think about how they could travel differently. And that always throws some quite interesting innovations around product, and we always get a good flurry of outreach from various producers and studios after that saying, "Oh, this could be a show," and maybe one day we will. But at the moment, we're focusing on the day to day.
Well, is that how the kind of your like collab trips, like Black Tomato times 007 or Black Tomato and Eater, is that how they came to be?
Yeah, I mean, those are great. I mean, it's funny. I was thinking about. Basically, partnerships have been really important for us as a company. When we started the business, like we sort of talk about, we sort of built the business on PR and partnerships. We wanted to kind of introduce how we thought, in the right publications to the right people, but also recognize that, sometimes a good partnership, can really make a difference. I mean, I think we probably all see lots of partnerships where you kind of scratch your head and say, I'm not quite sure what's happening here and hasn't been thought through. But with Bond, so that was really interesting. So we were approached by Eon Productions, who are now, were owned by Amazon, and obviously, recently have sort of given up sort of more creative control to them. But it was the 60th anniversary since Dr. No had come out, and they'd never collaborated officially with a travel company to bring the world of Bond to life. And so they reached out to us and said, look, we've been doing our research in the industry. about finding the right travel partner, your name keeps coming up. And I think also because we've been quite public about how we place so much importance on the role of other cultural phenomena inspiring people to travel. Like, it's always been my belief that we travel, even if it's subconsciously, as a manifestation of our other passions. You might not know it, but you might be reading a book that's set somewhere, not a guide, but set somewhere. It just makes you want to go there, or you're watching a drama that's shot somewhere and you're pulled in, or there's a new season's fashion line comes out inspired by a place. So all these things are kind of peppering your mind with reasons to go. And so we've always developed content around that and showing the connection. And so, Ian reached out and said, would you be interested in exploring this? And and after, and then about sort of 18 months of development, we launched, the James Bond exclusive trips, which have been so well received. And it was a real privilege, actually. So, they really opened up the world to us. We got to work with their archivists, their special effects guys, their stunts guys who met, or people who've been in the films. And it was really special. I mean, it's actually as an Englishman, it was almost quite intimidating. I felt this responsibility of taking this British icon and getting it right in terms of how we were going to introduce travel experiences that celebrated it and really meant something to people. But it went really well, and it has gone well. So, but again, it was, I think, this kind of collective view on the power of a partnership. And for us, it was great because we got to work with one of the most sort of iconic film franchises there's ever been. And connect travel to it in the right way. I think there's always, when new films come out, there's someone said, go and do this because this is where the film was. And I always refer to that almost as like stop and stare travel, which is you just go and someone points at it and said they did that there, you tick the box and you walk off. Whereas with Bond, it was really immersive. So like, if you're going to be taking this trip, it has to feel like you're stepping into that world. It has to feel curated. It has to feel that every hour of every day has been thought about. So when you are on that trip, when you come away from it, it's like, I was stepping into that world and I feel like I've had a deeper connection to it. So it was great. A labour of love. There's a lot of detail, and understandably, Eon Productions, incredible guardians of that. So we really worked hard, and it was really well received, and it introduced us also to new audiences who weren't aware of Black Tomato, which is another reason if you can do partnerships well, it's got to be more than the sum of the parts, but it can also take your offering into audiences who you think would be interested in Black Tomato, and thankfully they were, and they've taken some great trips.
So I mean, it's interesting you're talking about curating the trip here, and I think this is like an interesting one for me because you talked about going to some restaurant. Equal or better to a Michelin star, going to a restaurant on the backside of an island in Greece. And then you also said on the 007 trip, we wanted to make sure every minute of every day feels like you're on this 007 experience. So I think that's one of my questions here is about spontaneity versus curation, and also versus that sort of FOMO. Like, if you're a luxury traveler and you paid God knows how much money for a trip to France, like we actually talked about this with the Paris Tourism Board. You can't go to France and not see the Eiffel Tower. Like, it's a crime. But at the same time, you probably want to get them past those more typical things. You want to give them spontaneous perspective, but you want to curate it. It seems like an awfully tall challenge, especially in the world of like social media. So how do you think, FOMO, must see, must tick, spontaneity, curation, what's that mean for your business?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I mean, first, I'd say with Bond was like that because someone's asking for a Bond trip. So they want everything to feel like it's through the lens of Bond. So, if they're paying to be into this world, they want to kind of feel that like, it's not like, stop now, you got 8 hours free time and then we'll pick up the Bond experience later. They just want to feel they're in that world. But you're still getting a chance to explore. We have a term, this is probably the best way to answer this, that we use internally, which is called framed spontaneity. And what I mean by that is it's basically our job is to create and put people into places that we know they're interested in, but also know that there's opportunity for them to explore and go off and have those journeys and come across those moments of when it's like, there's certain parts of certain cities or certain parts of certain beautiful landscapes that just by wandering through things will happen and you're going to light upon things. Now, look, we'll still be making recommendations. You just go here and go there. But, I don't want, people travel different ways, bespoke service. So if people want to know what I'm doing every hour, every day, that's fine. For me, we are guiding and curating and ensuring that the opportunity to access is there and making these recommendations. but also encouraging curiosity. Like we operate the business according to 3 values, which is about being humble, thoughtful, and curious. Right, and curious is the driver. So I like it when people are still having this sense of I'm discovering, I'm coming across, and so that always informs how we look at it, and it's same with our partners. So that's how we achieve it. I think also with the FOMO, it's a good point. And look, our view is, there's a lot of stuff that social media throws up that you people want to see, and I mean, there's probably a whole separate podcast to get into the motivations of why you want to see that, right? But I think what we're always saying is, and look, there are some places that you definitely do want to see, but it's always like, looking beyond that or looking beyond the lens, and sometimes we're like, that shot you might want to take that you think you got to get in, say, in Iceland, right? A mile down the road, there's a tiny valley full of natural spring smoke that no one knows about, right? And trust me, that's going to blow your mind. It'll probably give you better content should you wish on social media. But it's also going to have more interesting experiences. You're going to feel more connected to the place, and you're not going to be sort of stood in line with hundreds of other people and then editing them out of the shot so it looks like it's just you in there. So I think it's not saying that social media doesn't play an incredibly important role in stimulating interest, but the role of a good travel advisor is not to rally against it, but to also, I think, encourage people to kind of keep curious and see beyond that, and perhaps also find your own experiences, maybe your own images of things that kind of are more personal, more meaningful to you. So it's a constant back and forth in terms of people's motivations, but it's our job to know the place. It's our job to encourage people.
Sounds like therapy.
Again, it is. We keep coming back to it, don't we? But yeah, and it's also how willing you are, and receptive you are to it. But it's I'm the same. If I go to somewhere I've never been before, there might be something I think, well, I've got to see it because there's a reason why it's being talked about so much. But sometimes I've had that experience and it's kind of left me sort of pretty much but then I'm suddenly dashing off because I want something else. So it's a blend basically.
What's your take on the White Lotus, and what has that mean for businesses like yours? I don't really have a question there. I just kind of want to hear what you have to say about it. And no spoilers.
No spoilers.
I'm only 1 episode into season 3. So
well, my
there
first,
you go.
Other than I can't believe they changed the theme tune. Which was my wife and I we sat down to watch it, like almost like just a theme tune. We're like, well, I see what you're trying to do, but anyway. Look, what I talked about earlier about kind of the role of cultural sort of assets inspiring. Like we've always had this big belief in kind of how dramas inspire it. We years ago we launched this series called Set Jetting, where we take iconic dramas and turn them into trips people could take and immerse them in places. And I remember when White Lotus, the first series came out, storyline aside, I remember just sat there with my jaw on the floor at how beautifully shot it was, and so I remember saying, no matter what happens in this story, how dark it is, this is just a love letter to Hawaii, and that particular 4 seasons. And I think it's the best way someone's captured the spirit of a place, around a story, but made it really part of the story in terms of the emotion.
Murder aside.
Yeah, exactly. It's like let's get past some of the darker stuff. But and so we definitely saw a spike in people interested in going to Hawaii, into that property, and then I think they kind of raised the game even more with the Italian one, because there was something, I think, not sure it's just because they got more beyond the walls of the hotel, but it was the spirit of that piece was so strong and so gorgeously shot. And so obviously we saw a massive spike in interest and bookings. That then becomes a challenge for the hotels. It's like because there's only so many rooms available, and getting the balance right between people who really want to stay there because they want to stay there for a long time and enjoy it, rather than people who maybe just sightseeing and saying I want to stay there. But and we're also seeing it in Thailand. I mean, to be honest, Thailand was getting a bounce even when they just announced that it was going to be filmed over there, because I think it just again put it on people's radars. So it definitely has an effect. It'd be fascinating to see where it goes. I think. What I think, I'm no spoilers alert because and there won't be, but I think what's been interesting with Thailand, in a good way, is there is more. It's more than just being in the hotel. And I think originally I was like, okay, if it's just the challenge is something, it's just in the hotel, you're not really selling the place that much. You're sort of going, well, you might get people going, well, I'm only going to go if I can go to that particular hotel where these scenes are shot. But the takeaway I'm getting from Thailand, and I love Thailand anyway, but they're really capturing, whether it's the bustle of Bangkok or kind of the craziness of some of the full moon parties plus the beaches. So as well as the hotel, and it's terrific boost for Four Seasons and the other properties involved. I think it's giving a really good bump to Thai tourism. So I think I'm 4 episodes or how many episodes in. It's great, and I think it shows that it does have an influence. I mean, if we look back at what dramatic vehicles have had, was first associated with driving people to places. I mean, it's always happened, but I remember way back in the day when Lord of the Rings came out, and it was all about New Zealand. Remember, it was like this kind of, I don't know how many there were, like 3 or 4 of them, but it was like sort of an 8-year New Zealand tourism advert, right? And so it was, and everyone sort of talked about that. And then obviously Iceland became so significant in the roles it played, from Game of Thrones to Interstellar to all these things. So, but I think White Lotus has just taken that mantle on and even more, and because it's so beautifully shot. And I just think the stories are great, but I could watch it with the sound off.
Do the customers seem familiar to you, the actors, or is that a stereotype?
Some, yeah. I mean, I won't say which ones, but yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. It does capture brilliantly the just the kind of tapestry of different people that come together in places, and some of the, I mean, not necessarily all the storylines you're seeing, but there's something about the exoticism or the I don't know, how you kind of feel out of your shell. It becomes when you're in places and you're meeting people, it all kind of adds to the kind of the interesting melee of what it's like to travel. So yeah, that's it's great. I wasn't surprised. I think people have had, it's, some people say it's not as strong as the others, but I'd call it a slow burner. But I'm into it so far. Apart from the theme tune, but I won't go on about that.
In the first episode, which is the only one I've watched of season 3. Well, for one thing, Mike White is a genius. So, Mike, if you're listening, please come on the podcast. There's that. But just Parker Posey's character, when she started introducing all of her children and which North Carolina schools they went to, I couldn't stop. I'm like, this is so brilliant. Like, I know exactly who she is. Okay. All right. So we're going to leave it. We're going to leave that there. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back on the other side and talk more with Tom about Black Tomato and luxury travel.
I say tomato, you say tomato. Welcome back. We're still discussing Black Tomato with Tom Marchant. And we were
it sounds so much better when he says it, doesn't it, Seth?
Everything.
Everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
I lived in New York for 5 years, and I tried to say tomato, and I got more laughs saying tomato than I did when I said tomato. So I gave up. I'm just stuck to my original one.
Yeah. It's authentic. Well,
exactly.
It's a whole other thing we can talk about. New Yorkers, prosciutto. What do you want to? Whatever. That's a different gabagool. That's a different conversation. Look, we're not going to get distracted. You know what I want to talk about? I love this thing you said on the first half about framed spontaneity. I wrote that down. I made a note of it. I thought it was a really great term. And my question was going to be about scaling your business. You've grown. How many? I mean, I don't know if this is public. How many? Like, you're a much some of their employee count or whatever. You're a much bigger business now. I know that keeping true to your mission and your true spirit as you get bigger is a hard one, especially when you're trying to do something as challenging as framed spontaneity. So I would love some thoughts on your staffing and how you say, okay, we're going to go from 10 agents to 100 agents, however many agents or advisors you have now. I don't actually know, and have them all be able to say, okay, great. The way I can frame a spontaneous thing in Sicily or in Thailand or in Hawaii is X.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, it's the big question for anything that's a kind of a bespoke or human-led business, about how you can kind of scale but still deliver that level of service that sets you apart, and and also creates the connection with the customer. I think firstly, in terms of how you get people thinking those particular ways, that comes down to culture and recruitment. And we are. I talked about our values earlier. We're kind of obsessive over them, not in a kind of cultish way, but we really believe in the right behaviors, the right people who sort of share those behaviors makes everything easier. So we recruit very extensively against them. I'd actually say sort of most people that get into interview process of Black Tomato, if you've kind of been interviewed, probably technically you're good to go. But it's actually the biggest meeting is when you sit with our HR people and you talk about our values, and there's definitely people who haven't joined the company probably because, and it's not a criticism, but they probably have a different outlook. So having people that are curious but married that with humility and thoughtfulness is really, really important. But it does then encourage a culture of people who buy into what we're trying to do, who will do the training, who will kind of ask the questions. And so you're kind of working with a strong base in terms of how you can bring people there. And then, so all the training stuff aside and the process we're doing, then it's about, well, how do we, if you've only got so many people, how can you actually bring scale? And so we work a lot on the back end on our systems and our tech. So we are a human-led business. We are a human business. We are at the high end of luxury. I'm a strong believer that it is about human relationships and connection. If you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, say, on a trip, you want to be talking to a human. You want that trust. You want to know someone's there, all there for you, and you want to understand their expertise and their guidance. At the same time, there is phenomenal technology that we use in the back end to bring efficiencies to processes, to allow us to kind of disseminate information, pull things together more quickly. That then also kind of means we can sell more trips without having to kind of recruit proportionally all the time. So we're constantly looking at it. What we talk now about, we want to sort of have the perfect blend between the best of human insight and expertise and the magic dust, but the best of technology as well. And I think, and if the goal is about delivering the best possible customer service experience, I think it's a perfect blend of those and putting the best bits of the humans and the technology out and putting it together.
So it's 2025 and you're a human-led company, and absolutely luxury, that's always what it's going to be. But how does AI play into this?
Yeah.
Play into this for you. What can you take from that?
Lots. I think AI is phenomenal in used in the right ways for us. I think it's easy, or it was easy. I think in some industries, as soon as AI comes out, for some people to put their head in the sands and sort of all is woe. We didn't ever see that with us because of the nature of the experiences we create are they're so curated, they're so built on relationships with partners and people around there, and the physicality of delivering these experiences that the AI kind of, the notion of someone just having the ideas and creating a trip was never going to be a threat to us in that. But the ability for AI to bring incredible efficiencies into our company internally in terms of, whether it's back office processes, whether it's providing tools for our travel experts to work more efficiently. And, I know it gets banded around with this idea of like AI being able to do 70% of kind of the mundane stuff, and that leaves the 30%, to be worked on. We do see that in terms of where we're applying some of this AI to kind of erode inefficiencies, so that we're giving our humans, we want to have 100% of their time to work on that 30%. And so there's stuff on the back end that we're working on, some really interesting stuff. So I can't really talk about because it's still in development, but we think it's moving the needle for us. Some stuff we have done on the front end was actually thinking about AI's role in the inspiration process and how we can perhaps, better convert people coming in. So, our front end, our shop window is our website, where we have everything from trip ideas to, inspirational articles to insights, plenty of content. And we launched at the start of this year a new platform called The Pursuit of Feeling. And this was kind of a continuation or celebration of this original insight we had about you don't know where you want to go, but you know how you want to feel. And as part of that, we created lots of new trips that we categorized according to different emotions. We'd developed like 5 brand new incredible itineraries that summed up particular emotions. We launched a podcast where we're talking to different people who are interesting people about how they've traveled for emotion. But at the heart of it is an AI built engine that we call the Feelings Engine. And what we wanted it to do was say, well, would it be interesting if someone could come onto the site and rather than just saying this is where I want to go, or we did have ways you could search according to some feelings, as a continuation of our past, but actually be able to go and have a conversation with this engine, just saying how you want to feel, and you can be as broad or specific as you want, and then start having a conversation back and directing you to trips according to your feelings. But the trick here being that all the data that is being interrogated and fed back to you is all our own data. So this is all data that's based on 20 years of insight, research, trips. So that engine is being powered by us. So what you're getting back is that's black tomato. It's not sort of going out onto the World Wide Web and grabbing anything. And it's been amazing. So we built it, tested it, and people have been coming on having conversations. And what it does is it will start making suggestions. Is this right? And then it will pop up and say, okay, how do you want to chat to one of our humans now? People are saying, great. So this kind of it's way more than like what a chatbot was. It's this, and we categorize all of our data according to different feeling spectrums. And it's a really beautiful user experience. I say incredibly like unbiasedly, but they're biased. So I think it's that's been a good example of how that technology has allowed us to enhance the customer experience at the inspiration stage. And it's not taking away from them being able to pick up the phone and talk to someone, but rather it's getting it going in a really interesting, engaging way. And then when they start speaking to one of the human travel experts, they know the conversations that have been happening and start blending it. So yeah, that's been interesting, and it's launched about a month ago, and it's been really well received. And we just have a watching brief on applicability of AI to the business. We have a really good internal IT team and a tech team, and we've been looking at the AI space for a long time. We have a very good partnership with a company called Ragu. That's a collaborative partnership with our tech partner, and we've literally sort of since they started building their business, we've worked alongside them to look at what we could do in the travel space. They're based out of the US, but a really good setup. And so we're working really interesting things with them. So yeah, more to come. But at the heart of it, it's how do we empower the humans? How do we make the customer experience better?
I'm curious. We've been talking a lot at Skift. Well, we and everyone else all over the world in the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks about, the stock market tanked here in the US. There's been a lot of instability around everything economic. If we are going to be in an intense period of slowdown here for the travel industry, and I kind of want to get a pulse check from you. Do you think the luxury consumer is the one that's kind of keeping the travel economy afloat here, or no? Or is that, just not how it is?
No, it's really interesting. It's obviously we like we're across this the whole time, and looking at trends. We can see the data, and most importantly, kind of feedback from the front line of conversation with our customers. I think it was interesting. If you go back to COVID, when we came out of COVID, it was the high end of the market that came back strongest. And I don't think maybe yes, because they probably had some more disposable income to spend, but I also think travel, in a fortunate position, is such a key part of their lives that perhaps was less easy to give up than others, or it was easy for them not to have to sacrifice it as other people did. I think what we're seeing at the moment is it's been a strong start to the year, which has been encouraging. I think towards the end of last year, there was a bit of a slowdown. You always see that around the election and some uncertain hurricanes, and we were wondering whether that was a symptom of something longer term, but that rebounded pretty quickly. We had a strong, holidays trading season, and the year started well. I think, what we're hearing from some customers now are some people are booking saying, I need to get away from everything. That's just that's too much, and even with the instability that might be affecting investment size or net assets or net value, they still want to take the drip because that's important. Others, we have heard some saying, I just can't get my head around. It's too much going on for me even to begin to start thinking about this trip I want to take. I'm gonna take it this year, but I'm probably going to get in touch in a month or so when I've seen it. So what I'd say is I still feel positive about sentiment. It's still moving in the right direction. But look, as we've seen over the years, it ebbs and flows. I think we're at this stage of the year where we're up on where we were last year, which is great. But I think everyone's so aware of how quickly things can change that you just don't ever take anything for granted, and you pay attention all the time to indicators. And that, like I said, there could be conversations, it could be booking periods. But we've seen some booking periods really drop. Right, suddenly people are like from inquiry to booking, it's getting much shorter because they've waited later to see and then they're gone. We've equally seen some people go the other way, and it's like they're booking into 2026 now because it's like I'm not seeing. So I'm probably giving you a very varied response there, but the honest answer is it's being discussed. We haven't seen anything significant yet, but there's no doubt that people are talking about what could go on and how that might impact plans.
I have to just follow up on this, and it's the part economist researcher in me. What is the indicator that you are most focused on for the luxury? I know like there's sometimes this indicator that they look at in the travel industry of RV sales, but I presume your clients are not buying too many RVs. So like, is it the stock market? What is the indicator that really matters for the luxury consumer?
There's not one that matters, right? There's not one that we say, right, that's our North Star, right? If that goes, we're going to see it. I think we do when we're actually doing our forecasting, we run a lot of kind of last 12 months, last 2 years data. So we're looking at trends through various periods on that to see. I think look, we're UK. Well, we start in the UK. We're an American business by business and revenue. Like sort of 75-80% of our business out of the States. So, in the UK, it's it's a tough market in the UK. The people I know who are trading here more, and they are often based that around like what's happening with interest rates. And you'll see that. I think at the top end, less so. I think sometimes it can be more like if you think there is. Geopolitical instability sometimes might be like, well, is that going to impact people's ability to travel, or do they need to be back for things? There's not one we look at, and it tends to be just a blend. You see the spikes. You can see when things come in, and when and you can literally see when things have been given in addresses by presidents about how things are moving. Luxury travel it's slower paced than the other side, right? So stuff that might happen and prompt a spike in another part of the travel sector. It might take a little longer, but I don't have. I remember when I was studying economics, we always had the hamburger index, and the price of the Big Mac around, and we're going to see that. But we don't have one of those that we're landing on at the moment. But I think it's the sentiment from the conversations and actually the booking window is always quite interesting. If we see that shifting and that you can take a lot from that, where it's like, right, I'm waiting, I'm gone, or but sometimes, like I said, there's the stories in there which I just need to get away, so I'm going to go now.
That's a funny counter cyclical of things are bad, therefore I need to travel more for a certain class.
It's sort of it's weird, isn't it? It's like reasons to go. I mean, like I remember. We thinking about like 20 years of Black Tomato. I remember going through, the first, 2008, financial crisis. And I remember like just before that happened, we actually had lots of inquiries coming in from Lehman Brothers actually in London, and maybe they saw things were coming. It was quite funny. We were a very small business. We're like, oh, this is interesting. And then, that happened. So, but it's sort of, I think we all work in this travel industry, and it's a wonderful industry to be in, but you are at the behest of so many external factors, aren't you? The environmental factors that, whether it's political, whether it's environmental, whether it's fiduciary, you just got to roll with them and adapt and make sure you can continue to be relevant and matter to your customers for when they're coming around to making their travel considerations.
And from economic trends to actual consumer trends, you were saying in the beginning too, I think you have a really great mindset about thinking through feelings and media and the ways and reasons why people want trips and what they want to get out of their trips. And so we do a megatrends every year, and we're always fascinated in consumer psychology and megatrends. Yeah. What do you think you need to know? Like, what should our luxury megatrend for 2025 or 2026 be?
I love your megatrends.
2020. What should our luxury megatrend for 2026 be?
I'm going to give. There's two that I'm going to give. I think it might have been in them, but they're not quite juxtaposed, but they're different. So one is about what we call like the earned experience, right? Where there is this feeling of, I talked about the person who wanted to get to the top of the mountain because they wanted to feel like achieved, but actually that wasn't right for them. There is a lot still of this, where this notion of, I want to take a trip, but in doing it, I want to feel like I'm either pushing myself mentally or physically. I perhaps want to feel like I'm pioneering in some way, that I'm going to a part of the world that is less known. I want to feel like I've earned. It's almost like the ending. It's almost like harks back to, travel in bygone years. Even like the old explorers, where you're doing it to get to the end point, you can look back and reflect on something you've done, and we're doing a lot of that. So whether it's expeditions or these get lost trips, families taking like really great adventures together, where there is this satisfaction of working for something. I think part of it again is, a lot of travel is reactionary, right? It's antidotes to the day-to-day. And I think, we are blessed to have so much stuff easily available. You have a button for everything, right? And I think sometimes there's this kind of aim of paring things back and becoming a bit more elemental and raw and kind of almost like connecting back to kind of what it was like to travel and having that sense of kind of being an explorer, pushing yourself and the satisfaction you derive from that. And probably also, let's be honest, probably fuels better dinner party stories when you get back home as well. But the earned experience, the satisfaction of doing something, there's a big thing about education or kind of upskilling or kind of bettering yourself. If we could get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and there's a lot about kind of how I progress through that and getting to my, it's self-actualization for myself about, I'm content with myself, but what does that mean to be content with myself? Well, I've done these things, I've pushed myself to these things. So the earned experience is big, and I think that will continue. And then one we've been talking about for a while, which is still growing, is this sort of pursuit or search of silence. We're again like people looking to properly, and I don't just mean get off the grid, because there's lots of ways you can do that, but finding true calm and quiet, which again, it goes, you talk about luxury, that's becoming increasingly rare and hard to find. And so we're finding people looking for truly remote locations to stay in where, a lot of the great business leaders talk about going away for a week where they just read. We'd see some of that. I'm going to have my reading week somewhere, and it's about that kind of silence. And there've been some really nice, really interesting developments around kind of science, like, the national parks are quiet, that started up a few years ago. So you've got these areas of land, I think the first one was in Ecuador, which are designated as a park of quiet. So you can't have any unnatural noise in there. So no white noise. So the only sound you're hearing are nature sound, whether it's the wind or the water. And again, it sort of goes back to this reactionary, this opposite view. Like my day to day is, even if I think it's quiet, I live in central London, I've got friends from the country come in and think they're, stood in the middle of a circus or something. I'm just like, well, it's just normal. And then when I go somewhere that's quiet, it's discombobulating, but then it actually is incredibly, informative and becomes really meaningful. So we're seeing that. That's a big one. And then the last one, well, not last, I've got loads, but the last one that's sort of keeping me interested is this thing we call like faraway families. And I think this is still, it's sort of like still kind of a nod to what came out of COVID. But what happened, what we saw, and maybe you guys saw this as well, what came out of COVID was people still wanted to travel, but the pace at which they were traveling, it used to be like rush, long weekend, tick, 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 tick. And it's something like, actually, I want to travel, but take longer time in one place or two places and really kind of lean into that culture and immerse myself there and form connections. I think during COVID, we all got quite nostalgic for previous travel taken and memories, a lot of childhood memories I think I had as well, about like communities or villages we've gone to in southern France or Italy. And so what we're seeing now is people going to places and connecting with locals and meeting other families there and actually forming these bonds and then revisiting, not being the only trip they do every year, but they go back and they're starting to build almost like relations and put roots down in some of these places. It's almost like your other family in places and feeling this sense of connection to another place that comes from more than just racing through and snapping the picture and heading out. So and there's some really beautiful stuff we're seeing there with places in India and Iceland and stuff. So, and I think that speaks to one of the really kind of beautiful things about travel, which is connecting to other cultures and having your mind opened by new relationships. And so, yeah, I think that kind of faraway family is more of a summary of it being less ephemeral and more connected. And that's personally what I thought will continue.
Well, I'm curious. We're going to wrap it up here, but I do have to know, for somebody who is, at the absolute apex of luxury travel, what is the most unforgettable trip you personally have ever taken?
Oh God.
I know it's like asking somebody what their favorite movie is, right?
Yeah. Do you know what? And it's going to sound slightly corny, but I will. It's more kind of familiar. I went, and it's also because it's fresh in the mind, and it's not really luxurious. So I'm probably going to the wrong answer, but I'll just say why it meant something to me. After there was that terrible earthquake in Morocco, Marrakesh, a couple of years ago, and lots of lives are lost in the Atlas Mountains. And we've got a very strong relationship with Morocco, particularly Marrakesh and Atlas. We work with lots of people there in villages and guides, and and we worked hard with charities out there to support and with our guides and their families. And then when we've been working with this village, and there were loads of kids there, and they really had nothing. And I went back out there last year with my two daughters, who were like 5 and 3 at the time. And we went up to this village. We kind of drove and then trekked, and I ended up sort of carrying both of them over my shoulders. It felt like for ages. Anyway, we got up there and we carried, and we took. And one of the greatest joys for me as a father with having children is kind of exploring the world with them, and seeing them kind of react to places for the first time, and see the awe and wonder coming onto them. And so, but I went with them to this village, and we in London, we'd gone and gathered all these toys because these kids had nothing. And then we went and spent the morning or the day with this village. And my daughters met these kids, and they all played and they shared toys. And I just spent, an afternoon with one of my favorite, with a friend of mine, a guy just sat there drinking, my wife drinking mint tea and meeting these and watching my kids play with these kids, and just form these incredible like friendships that my daughters still talk about, and we're planning to go back next year. And again, it sounds slightly corny and cliched saying that, but that for me was everything about kind of the power of travel, connecting to places, and being able to see stuff through my kids' eyes. I mean, I've done all kinds of crazy adventures all over the world, and I love all those. But that for me, at the moment, is probably that's unforgettable, I think, for me.
Well, that is an absolutely perfect place to wrap up today. Tom of Black Tomato, thank you so much for joining us. This was a fascinating conversation. And for everybody else who is listening out there, if you have any questions for us, please email Seth and I at podcast@skift.com. And if you have enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, like us, or give us 5 stars. It helps us get the word out about the Skift Travel Podcast. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Tom. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much, Tom.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Skift Travel Podcast. Wherever you're listening, please make sure to subscribe. If you like what you're hearing, rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review. It really helps get the word out about us, our podcast, and make sure that we can still continue to bring it to you free of charge every week.
If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell as well. That way you'll know every time we have a new episode.